Welcome to the next in this social enterprise workshop series. Today we have Moncef Lakouas joining us from BCG Moncton. He's been the CEO, Executive Director for the last 4 years. He's also sitting on our Social Enterprise Advisory Council. And today he's here to talk with us about staffing your social enterprise. So this is a topic that we've heard come up from a lot of different folks as they think about both launching and growing a social enterprise. How do you staff it appropriately and all of these things. And so when I spoke with Moncef about this webinar, this workshop, he had some great stats about their social enterprise. So maybe, Moncef, we could pass it over to you with the first question, which would be, tell us a bit about your staffing model and your social enterprise at BCG Moncton.
Sure, yes. And thanks for having me, Vanessa. It's actually BGC.
BGC? Oh my gosh, I am
You're not the only one. You're not the only one.
worst with acronyms. So oh my gosh, acronyms.
No, I'm still going through that. It's actually, yeah.
What did I say? BCG?
Yeah. It's like, sounds like the vaccine. But anyway, the Moncton Boys and Girls Club, or BGC, now has been around for about 66 years now. The social enterprise has long been standing for 50 years.
Yeah, 50.
In the community, actually. And we're going to be discussing all the fun about that. Social enterprise here, it's actually an early learning center that serves communities from 0 to 5, and also an after school, which is 5+ up until 12 years old. And we've been operating this model for 50 years now. It started a long time ago by the late Claudette Bradshaw. She's the one who started the organization. It was called Moncton Parkton Heights back then. We run about 15 full-time staff right now, and by next year we anticipate on a revenue, I would say, of about $1.1 million. And by next year, eventually, we're gonna add 50% more staff, and we're gonna eventually double budget, which eventually will be reaching $1.9 million. So staffing is crucial to run an early learning center, because it's a matter also of ratios that we have to respect. Depends on if you're running babies, the model is different than if you're running the toddlers and the 3s and the 4s. So the more the younger they are, the more staff you need, which it's a huge cost, because our biggest cost is definitely overheads. And then we have maintenance and managing the building as a second cost, and then the third biggest cost is actually food, to make sure that those little bellies and are fed every single day. So I'll be super happy to answer any questions when it comes to how do we attract them to the building, how do we onboard them to the building, how do we do a great job into onboarding them, and how do we create and instill our culture versus what they've seen or had before, and how do we treat them on an ongoing basis to make sure that we increase our chances to retain the talent, because it's extremely costly to replace them, and it's also annoying.
Yes, yeah. Well, yeah, and maybe you could dive into that. And I'm also wondering if you want to tell us a bit about your plans for growth and how you'll go about doing that, both from like a staffing and I guess a growth model. But wherever you'd like to start out of everything you just outlined would be great.
Absolutely. So now we serve about 65 young people, I would say, children, and we eventually anticipate to increase the model by, I would say, up to 50% by next year. If everything goes according to plan. If I can't do it next year, eventually, because of the expectations from the province or the RFP that the province of New Brunswick is opening, for us, we'll be able to hit 50% growth by 2025. So eventually what we're going to be doing as of next year, we'll be opening in 32, if I'm not mistaken, 32 more spaces, serving 0 to 2 mostly, because that's where the biggest gap is. A lot of families are settling in Moncton, but they can't find jobs because they don't have daycare, which is dangerous to not just the economy, but to the families that are settling. They cannot sustain themselves. So which we'll be able to solve that problem, because the economic need is there. Moncton is growing. Moncton is growing because of young families, and those young families have access to babies on average two. And a lot of the daycare spaces are not suited at the moment right now to be able to respond to that demand. Sorry, so we'll be able to offer 32 more spaces as of next year eventually, and that, if you look at it, will require probably about 8 staff, full-time staff, and yeah, that's, I would say, probably about, it's close to eventually, it's an increase of 50% to 60% on the total budget, which makes it closer to 1.8 or $1.9 million by 2024. Yeah.
Well, and like the thing I noticed when you were speaking there was you're meeting a real market demand.
Yes.
And is that growth funded through the provincial government or somewhere
Yeah.
else?
Well, it is. It's mostly provincial governments, mostly for early childhood education centers. Not-for-profits or social enterprises are always about one thing and one thing only: is what's the problem that you're solving for your clients.
Yeah.
And this happened to be in something that is extremely needed, which is finding daycare spaces so we can be able to work. We have noticed that during the pandemic, when we shut down the daycares, we were like, okay, well, now who's going to go to work? As grocery stores, hospitals, even doctors and nurses need daycares. They rely on those to be able to get to work. And suddenly and quickly, the government of New Brunswick realized that early childhood centers, which is most people call them daycares, are now an essential business, which is equal to a grocery store or equal to a business. Equal to a hospital. So we'll be able to function in the premise that we are the base that allows every worker to get to work. And therefore, we need to make sure that we're doing things properly. The second premise is we're part of the education process. Education doesn't start when they get to school. Education starts when they are here, because most things in life starts from a little child's perspective, start in daycare. That's when they learn how to speak. That's when they learn how to draw. This is how they learn a lot of things. You would be surprised what kind of education happens on a daily basis and on a weekly basis to get them to be ready for school. Mm-hmm. And most of those problems actually can be mitigated here, because if there is any plans for any special needs, we can actually detect those as early as 2 years or 3 years, and then we can set a plan together to be able to set them up for success. So the business we are in is extremely great, crucial. We're dealing with human beings, but we also have a lot of expectation in terms of health and safety and maintenance and stuff like that we have to maintain. So staffing for us is crucial, because we only align ourselves with the people who have a high level of care for the children. So we do not sacrifice service for money. We don't exist for money. We exist to educate. And that's the vision, that's the culture, and that's the values that we do share with every single one of our staff. That's why when we hire only the best and only the experienced, because it's a matter of trust. If a family is dropping their child here, they have a lot of expectations from us, and we have to make sure that we're meeting those demands every single year and every single day. So we only hire ECEs and early childhood educators. We don't hire anything but that. If they don't have their ECE, we work with them on a plan to get their ECE, and we help a lot in terms of their personal development plan. We pay for some of that just to get them to where they need to be. We give them time to read and to study. We match them with experienced ECEs from here, so they can help them with their studies to be able to get them there. We pay for the books just to help them get to that transition quicker. And we also explain to them that there is a significant dollar increase that comes to salary, to wages when it comes to that, because the salary for an ECE is not a salary for someone who doesn't have it. So it's, in some instances, it's about $27,000 difference a year in terms of salary compensation, plus all the benefits attached to that. So yeah, in terms of accessing or attracting staff, we have a little bit of criteria that we do have in terms of an organization, but there is a whole process in terms of when they start here and how they evolve in the organization.
Yeah, so it sounds like you have a pretty well thought out plan for recruitment and upskilling. So with the if they don't have a relevant certification, how you're going to help them get that.
Yep.
You mentioned a bit about the, I guess, like retention and onboarding to your
Yeah,
culture. Maybe you could help us understand a bit about that.
absolutely. Well, the best recruiter is your reputation.
Yeah.
This is what we have noticed is you can drop a lot of resumes on Career Beacon or whatever it is, or Facebook, but it's not going to draw any attention unless somebody from inside tells them that it's a really cool employer to work for. So your best promoter, your best marketing is word of mouth. It's very old, but it works. It never disappoints. If staff from here know other staff from different organizations that are working in conditions or work environments that are not to the best, well, guess what? They'll let them know that things are way better here, and that's your best value for the dollar invested. I know it costs about $300 or $400 to put a job on Career Beacon, and sometimes we pay for that. Nothing wrong with it against Career Beacon, but it's just sometimes for that to get the advertisement, but we end up hiring somebody else based on referrals, just because sometimes we don't get enough resumes or enough good resumes from anything that we post out there, not just Career Beacon. But we end up actually getting somebody who's super qualified, most of the time in ECE, working in a different environment, or even coming from the school district, just because somebody else working here told them that it was an employer of choice. So to anybody who's listening, is your culture is definitely a good testament of the quality of staff that you attract. So you have to strive to build a good company culture in order for you to attract the best.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But the culture and people being excited enough to tell their friends that they should.
Absolutely. So what we have heard a lot is from our staff is like it feels like home. And we strive to build one thing and one thing. It's never about the person, but it's always about the team. And we always got each other's back. From the board to ED to staff, we're in it all together. So it's not just one person screwing up, it's all of us having to improve our processes to make sure that we deliver the best service to the client, because the service that the client doesn't know just me. The client knows the organization, and the organization has a team, and that team has the accountability on itself to be able to constantly strive to develop better processes and good development plans for staff to be able to do their job properly. So from a management perspective, we're constantly thinking about how can we remove the barriers from staff, make sure that the very next day they're doing a better job, which is concepts that have been developed when it comes to lean canvas and continuous improvement. You have to have a continuous improvement machine in your organization, because that's how it allows you to be able to put everything out there on a whiteboard from a process perspective, and as a team collectively strive to offer better service and better processes through better processes to your clients every single day. So recruitment is definitely attached to company culture, because if you have a great company culture, your staff will be your best ambassadors, and your staff will be able to bring their friends. And most of the time, they're only referring to people that will get the job done, because it's a matter of reputation too. So that's what it is. So that's what we have tried. Most of our people are coming here from referrals. And I'm knocking on wood, we have probably about an 80% retention rate of our staff. So which is really good. Onboarding is, like I said, onboarding is very formal. Like every month something happens in terms of training, in terms of development plans, and we meet with them regularly. So there is a one-on-one with the staff, but it's also there is a monthly meeting with the team, and there is a quality meeting with the whole staff. Like there is 50 probably or 60 of us in the whole building. And the goal is just to make sure that we're capturing everything that needs to be improved. And that's what we're hitting those items each one. So the team is getting to everything that needs to be improved. That goes into projects, and the project goes to a to-do list. And that to-do list is making sure that every single day from a management perspective, that could be process, could be capital, could be whatever it is. Improvements could be sick days, could be benefits, whatever it is. It's like a wish list. We discuss all aspects are getting in the way of us being the company of choice for all our staff and therefore our families, and we hit those items every single day. That's from an onboarding perspective.
Yeah.
We also have the perks. We have a huge and good compensation package. We have every organization. Just because we're not for profits, we have to pay cheap salaries. People need to live and live decently. They have families. They have bills to pay. They have hopes and dreams too, and ambitions. And they also have to make enough to be able to cope for the living expenses that are happening around them. So they are willing to do God's work, but they also need to be compensated properly. So from an organization perspective, in the last 3 years and a half, we increased salaries significantly based on what they used to be. We improved the benefits significantly based on what they used to be. And that allowed us to just retain them. Now, if you go somewhere else, you don't see the value of going anywhere else because I don't believe you will get what you have here. And that's what we strive to give to our people. Only the best.
Only the best. Yeah. And, I had a question and you kind of answered it, but I would like to just pick up on a few things you said around the nonprofit sector. And for me, profit is not, it's sometimes maybe the wrong way to anchor the type of work because it's community work and it's just that you're, as the organization, not creating margin or profit for someone, but you still have to pay people. I like that in a realistic way. And so that's exciting. I'll ask both of my questions together and you can take it where you'd like. I'm wondering, if you feel like you have to compete with the private sector, and I ask that because you maybe did answer that a little bit already, and then kind of relatedly, how many of these systems and processes were in place when you came into the organization, and then how did you think about building on what was there to be able to meet the needs of both the people that were there as well as the people that you want to bring in as you think about
Well, here's the thing. A not-for-profit is a business. And if you don't understand that from a management perspective, it could be dangerous because it's directly related to fiscal responsibility. So if you don't think of cash the exact same way a for-profit thinks, there is a problem. And there is nothing wrong about running your not-for-profit as a business. You just decide the structure of your fiscal management differently than a for-profit. So for profits, it's different outcomes when it comes to the profit. You have dividends, you have whatever it is. For not-for-profit, that's different considerations because you have to strive to make a profit as a not-for-profit. Because if you're constantly living in negative statements, it's not sustainable. So for many reasons, if you own a building or not, if you invest in your staff, if you invest in their development, if you invest in innovation and growth, if you invest in R&D, you have to make enough money to be able to invest in those, right? So if you're a social enterprise that is not developing a model by which you are profitable at the end of the year for reinvestment purposes, could be capital, could be putting money aside for rainy days, could be for investing in growth. Well, you're constantly struggling. You're living in a race. You're constantly looking for money. So you have to base your model from a social enterprise the exact same way a business does. So therefore, there is no difference between whatever the private sector is offering and in your model. It's the exact same processes, or even better. So you have to apply your continuous improvement. You have to always have the voice of the client in mind. You have to strive to offer better services. You have to constantly strive to treat your staff better. You have to offer competitive wages. You have to offer retirement plans and benefits. In order for you to be able to retain the best, you have to pay them equally as anywhere else. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to attract the best and be able to offer the best and charge decent fees that allows you to recoup for the expenses that you're actually offering. So you have to build your financial model the exact same way as a private sector, and you have to allow for profit. So most people will probably look at this and think, like, are you crazy? You're not for profit. You should be breaking even. What if something happens? How are you going to invest in your growth? That's my biggest question to them. And then I'm willing to have a conversation with anybody. So if a for-profit is always aiming for 15% profit, 20% profit or more, at least 5%, because if you're 5%, you're just surviving. But if you want to do better, which allows yourself to be able to have a cushion, build a capital improvement fund. Now, most not-for-profits or social enterprises are living, if it's not for fees or for service, they also have fundraising initiatives that they can tap into. They have to renovate your building. You have to renovate your fleet of buses and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And if your fee for service is not allowed for those to be replaced because you're not having profit, where that money is going to come from? You're not. I don't think you're going to go to the bank and loan it, because that's a cost added to your expenses, and you have to come up with that money somewhere, somehow. So you have to run your business model based on a formula that allows you to have some gain at the end of the day, that you can either transfer for capital improvement funds for rainy days, or you have to have something that allows you to replace your assets. Could be building or transportation. So that's why I'm thinking the competition for me doesn't really happen at the status level. It happens at the business level the exact same way. I want to be the best early childhood educators for education center in the region.
Yeah.
And in order for me to get there, I need to run it the exact same way as a for-profit does.
Yeah, and I like what you said about the gains. I often use the word surplus
Yeah.
for a nonprofit because it's not a profit motive, but I agree with what you said in the sense of like you have to generate enough to invest in the organization, and and there's lots of, as we know, unknowns that can happen, like
Yeah.
pandemics, and
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
sure for you folks it cost a lot to
Yeah.
respond to the pandemic.
Well, every time there is a market test,
Yeah.
some disappear,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Those were not proactive enough or
Yeah.
didn't have plans for the rainy days,
Yeah.
unfortunately will disappear. And those who are their capacity to adapt by having proper fiscal management and proper business thinking, those will eventually stick around for a little longer
Yeah.
until the next challenge.
Yes, until the next challenge. Exactly, right. And I like that. It's being prepared for the unknowns. And so, as you think about when you came in and the systems and processes that were in place in terms of staffing, and then how you built on those, like how did you go about doing that, and what advice would you give people?
Say that again.
So when you came into the organization,
Yeah.
because it has been around for a number of years, I'm assuming there were already some systems and
Yeah.
processes in place. So as you think about like your experience, both responding to the pandemic and growing the organization based on the new needs in the community,
Hmm.
how did you go about building on the systems and processes that
Yeah.
were already in place to be responsive to what the changing needs were? Because I guess what I've heard you say is, that since you've been in this role, there's been a lot of changes um, to your organization,
Yeah.
both
Yeah.
internally and externally, really.
And you know what? To me, it's the difference is running a business versus running a not-for-profit. Like literally, because running a business requires different processes as running a not-for-profit. From inside, when you're running a not-for-profit and you just do the same things, you do a fundraiser, you bring some money, you pay some dollars to staff, you're constantly cutting here and there to make sure that you're not paying high wages, not to expose yourself to, higher, when you need more revenue and you don't know where it's coming from and stuff like that. But yeah, like this is a business with pillars. What does the financial pillar look like? What does the marketing pillar look like? What does the operational pillar look like? What does the sales funnel pillar look like? So it's actually a business of components that need to run at their maximum efficiency levels. And when you start to look at those, what is my fundraising process? And how do I get to my ultimate revenue model that will allow me to do all these things for the community, but also for my staff, and leave me some so I can be able to reinvest? You start thinking about your model differently. You just don't do an event. You do an event with the science. What is this event? What's the revenue? What's the target audience? What's the profit from it or the surplus? How's the surplus going to help me meet my financial objectives? And you start looking at things from a business mindset, not just a charity mindset, right? It's two different things. So I'm not saying that some people just do random stuff and hope for the best to happen. But what I'm saying is you need to have a plan. What does the year look like?
Strategy.
And then you look at all your processes internally from your marketing that helps you, right? Your marketing is affecting your fundraising is affecting your operations, your fundraisers are related back again to your financials, and all of that is interconnected. So you look at those separately and set your best practice processes for those. And then you look at all those combined together and you make sure that they're all running smoothly. The operations are working with sales and sales is working with marketing and vice versa. So you have to run your organizations from a scientific business mindset that applies to any business, like from the big one as the Irvings or the McCains to the small ones of 2 employees. It's the exact same notions. You're running a model for good, to do good, but in order for that to be sustained, you need to run it the right way from a financial perspective and operational perspective as well. So that's why anything that you do, even when we use the term fundraising, you can take that term and take 2 different organizations, and that fundraising will look completely different in those 2 organizations. Because one will apply the right processes to get to where they need to be, and one will just do some kind of fundraising without the science or the processes backing up that process, and you will get 2 different results. Completely different, because one will require the right fundraising process, and one, well, let's say, will write grants and constantly chase grants and reports. The element of doing that versus the proper fundraising, which is completely different, your annual campaigns and your major gives and all that fun stuff. You're both doing fundraising, but you're completely different, doing it 2 different ways. One will get to results quicker and better, and one will constant struggle of meeting revenue objectives versus covering all expenses. We're sometimes missing those. And if you're missing your objectives in terms of revenue, it affects your whole model. And we have seen many organizations in our own region disappearing just because the lack of those processes being built in place.
Yeah, and I guess it's like maybe a final question as people think about maybe bringing in enough money to grow their social enterprise or launch it, or think about, what these systems are. What advice do you have for people to like get out of the day-to-day franticness of grant writing and trying to figure out the money to getting to that higher level of being able to develop a strategy to achieve the outcomes that you want to achieve?
Well, you need to have a plan. That plan needs to be developed by the best people at it, the subject matter experts, not by you if you don't know how to build one. You just don't fake it, right? You need to look at your social enterprise from efficiency, and you need to align yourself with the best. So if it's financials, if it's fundraising, if it's whatever, if it's operational, if you're good at those, great. But if you're not so good at them, you need to surround yourselves with the best so you can be able to get to where you need to be. So in order for you to be able to get to that level, you need to, once set the plan, hire the really best at helping you get to that plan, and build the processes by which you can develop a tracking methodology by which you know if you're going to hit plan or not. I'll give you an example. I have, for example, let's say as an organization, we want to hit $2 million. And in order for us to hit $2 million, we're going to get, let's say, 1.5 from the social enterprise model and $500,000, or let's say from the fundraising aspect, right? You go to the market and then you find somebody who can help you write grants, and they'll do their best. Sometimes you hit, sometimes you miss, and you're constantly chasing. You're never proactive. Versus another organization who will say, I will hire the best fundraiser that I can find in town. I will pay them extremely well, and they will help me get to where I need to be. And I'm going to build the processes around them so we can be able, as an organization, to be where we need to be 12 months from now. Go. One organization has the metrics and has the expertise and has the knowledge, one organization is doing their best based on what they know, but it's not necessarily expertise. So one organization will hit gold, one organizations will keep trying. So what we need to start to get at is not-for-profit or social enterprises, whatever term we do utilize, is you need to attract the subject matter expert that will help you get to the plan. They know what to do and how to do it. And you need to invest in their compensation properly because it's an investment, it's not an expense. Forget the model that you need to pay smaller wages, attract people that have a lot of good intentions and a lot of passion, but not necessarily the skills to get you to where you need to be.
Yeah.
And we're just doing God's work. We're going to do our best to a model that says we have a commitment to our families and to our community. We're in this business model that we own and we're good at it. This is the right staff and the right processes that we're going to develop in order for us to help us meet our commitment to the community. And this is what we do best. And on top of that, we're going to have a surplus that would allow us to reinvest in our company, which means in our company.
Yeah, I like that. And it's something that we've been talking about internally, social enterprise as a community economic development model, right? And like you've talked a lot about an investment mindset, which is, it's like not just how do I meet my cash flow needs today, but how do I create enough revenue to be able to invest in the future that I want to create. So I think that is a great way to summarize, especially like from the sense of, staffing.
Yeah.
So staff being a critical part of achieving that community economic development that we're all hoping for. So maybe before we close, I'll give the last word to you.
Well, if I just give you an example, when you think of the most successful companies in our region, one of them may arise as e-Irvings. Their processes are very much understood and executed on. They have best practices based on what they want to give to the world and to their clients, and they follow them to the T, right?
Yeah.
Why do the social enterprise has to be any different?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because it's also another business model. It's just the structure of it, the legalities of it is different. But still, if you're in it to offer some kind of a service that you're getting compensation for, and you're going to hire people, why do those people, in terms of the way they execute their jobs or the way they're getting compensated, any different from the other model?
Yeah.
How is that different? Oh, you're doing God's work versus private work. So therefore, your compensation should be half. Your processes should not be as efficient as they are in the other private sector. To me, that's not true. Is you're going to run it the exact same way as any successful private company as a social enterprise that will allow you to live in abundance because your service is needed. Clients are so happy and satisfied they're willing to pay, and you're getting that money. You're properly compensating your people. You're not cutting on wages or anything like that. You're properly maintaining your building. You're properly maintaining your fleet of transportation, and you have enough to run because you're needed. Your services are needed, and your problem that you're solving works. And that, to me, that's the only sustainability plan that I have for my organization, because I put that pressure on me in order to develop the best operations and the best processes to keep meeting the demands of my community. Versus I'm a charity, social enterprise, I'll give you what I can, and you have to accept that. I don't like that model. That's why we run things a little bit differently.
Yeah, well, and it reminds me of something that Pond-Deshpande, one of our founders, said. As he thinks about like investing in creating social good and all this stuff, is one of the things he comments on regularly is bringing operational excellence to the community sector, which I think is what you've commented on here. So thank you.
He's way wiser. So those were I spent an hour and a half trying to say that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm gonna put it probably on a frame somewhere in my building.
Yes.
Exactly.
Well, and he has a book. I have it on my bookshelf over there somewhere, but
Perfect.
the name is escaping me at the moment. But I think it's called something like Entrepreneurship for Impact, and
I have to read it.
So yes,
I really have to read that. Then my next conversations with you will be about 2 minutes.
2 minutes. There you go.
I can just drop something like that and be like, this is it.
This is it. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's great to go through the examples, and thank you for sharing your insight today.
Oh, it's a real pleasure. Thanks for having me.